maha yeso omene mene yeso omene yeso omene maha mene yeso omene maha mene yeso omene maha mene yeso omene maha mene so gewande yenyadat Tenpa nyame sha je ja bon je jen ro ji ja ma le te sa lang bara shun la so danga chan chan dang go chua yin da se tene ka chang a so janda de ga na damba ji xia deng go zu ne damba ji ge no ni du ha damba de xie cha wa re se
full truth, and out of that, we completed the truth of suffering. The truth of suffering was completed.
nga zo nambe ge che na le kare la ne te ji se ke zan pe de re sa sa ji cho den de cheme chi bu de la wa za cheme chi bu la na sa ji cho den de kare le yin na ya che sa che sa te ga che sa ge kan sa de de yo re za cheme chi bu de la wo re se
The cheme but the
cheme chi bu la na kare na ke ge la de cha ga che ke te ga che ke ge cheme chi bu se
Buddha Shakyamuni is somebody we can completely rely on 100% that whatever he knows is something that is the complete knowledge.
chame chibala mud chame chibu imbe de karilana mug so the chama imel ta gores ke ga ka somba de ngoye ne chi da hemba yiwa yin de song ke ga ka za de chame chibu nga so ja sha ja de cha ga chö sa ga ka za de cha ure la ure se
When we talk about somebody who has that quality, that we say that whatever he said is the truth.
yeah just cha da for me la ri that de nga so nan ji cha na ri ta za na mud ne ta ne ta bo den ba ze yo re la nga so ta ne ta wa da mud ta bo den ba ze yo re la se
when we talk about somebody, he's somebody is very honest and dependable.
Mata trampo tempa ime karal ta gorlan mata go dombal tana khagwa yo mare miti go zopol tana khagwa yo mare miti go jono lojo pe pinjal tana nga so mata trampo ime tempa ime khagu mare se
When we think about this type of quality, like we cannot measure it by looking at the person to say, oh, he's a very honest and dependable person, and we cannot measure it by the wealth that he possesses or the possession that he possesses.
ona tanda mata trampo re tempa re la mata trampo tempa ime de karal ta gorlan miti ke ja hya ta go miti ke ja chi shwa ma se ni shwa ma se kati na ke kan shewa de ngoe ne sa tempa de shewun du da mun du kara ga shewa na je de kara ga la le da ta un du da mun du ta ke ga kan shewa de ja sha ja na ne ta ja cha ga chel la na mun du ta kan shewa de ma che shu ngoe ne sa tempa he den ke yin 다 달라 빠삐게 말이 자차되는 것도 정보 요르다 뭐데 덴바 요르라는 미리 해와 해야도 데마 데라타네 뭐데 덴바 천재서 아들에서
So how we measure somebody to have such quality is by what he says and how he carries out what he says. So this is something, whatever he says, and then he does it, whatever, and then that is something that one can completely believe in. So that is somebody with that quality.
디나게 가서 서지 쩌된데도 제가 최소가 재미집부 이미 진세드 서지 쩌된데게 송 참아임바 송도 소함에 봐 임바 진짜라 때네 서지 쩌된데 재미집부래라 그래서
So, that is why we say that this is what the quality that Buddha possesses. So therefore, this is whatever Buddha utters or says, that is something that one, like we know that it is the truth, and it is something that we can depend.
다 서지 좀 소도 원내 타네 소아메 박소 다들 가사 선자와지나 들 걸레데 메den게 들 제스 주메 den게 딱 원내 타네 단다게 소디잖네 담바지 소아메 박소라 때네 서지 좀 된데 참에 좀 좋도 소아레스
So when we think about that, his whatever Buddha utters is the truth, and something that we can completely depend on. Therefore, this is we have that Four Noble Truth that Buddha has said. That is something that we can completely rely on, and we have know that this is the truth.
어떠잖아 하나다
Yeah.
리사드네 나 저저 세대체 저기서 아마라게 저기서 진이도 저기서 우리 대내가 저가는 하나다 서지저 된데 담바저데 가디소이래라들 디 가디레 소이래나 서지저 된데 서지 타마단데 서지네다 샤데데 샤지치 그래 지제를 다 서지 산에 tö마 담바저 소초도 소래서
And then when did Buddha taught this Four Noble Truth? He taught this Four Noble Truth 49 days after attaining his enlightenment.
샤지 시기길래 샤데길래 서지저네 서지 산에 담바지 지식 있어서 다다 줘 다대 쳐박겠는데 대내다 서지저 된데 그 담바지가 나네다 서지네 추 토마스 온저들다 추 담보 가르솔라네 담바지 소레스 다 담바지는 건네다네 남비기 추가 가서 빼가 안에 자체가 나타나게 되다서 자체가 나타나는 잠벌리는 나도 감나야 퍼대서 여den긴다 담바지가 또 야보도 시설에 대니까 가를 털리나 녀래지 안다 된게 가리나 논추가 돌발로 지사 여den게 좀빼 대충부터 잘돼요 그래서 담바지는
So the Four Noble Truth is the first teaching that was given by Buddha Shakyamuni after he attained the enlightenment. So this teaching serves as for example, airport, from where all the airplanes can fly everywhere, right? Just like that, it is like a foundation from which all the other Buddhist teachings you can go to. So this acts as a foundation.
다 서지 저된데 가르치란 다가른 잠벌인디 나는 내 댕게 스제 가임바다 서제 마사케게 스제 가임바다 다 스제 내 대사 그 사자 리체 가임바 탄초도 동하던 바래다 탄초도 동하던 바래다 요래서
So here he taught that all the sentient beings that exist in the samsara and this place, the samsaric place that we all exist in, these both are taught as the truth of suffering.
다때서 다다다다네 바때지게는 가서 지전에 팬데 가버린다 던데가 해고서 라레날 가르소나 둥하지에다 해고들 네 가든 라나 둥하겠네 잠벌리가 롬바 가노던 둥하 짜니면서 롬바든 로일라는 로사 치야요 말을 롬 가는 라나 둥하가 롬바 쩐저래 되고서 둥하 조사가 롬바 쩐저래 되 둥하 짜니 좋아하면서 롬바든 로사 요 말에 네 가든 라나 둥하겠네 샤다래서
So it is taught in Lamrim that whichever places you go to, whether it's a different country or a different places, all of them are the suffering. It's part of truth of suffering. So if you're trying to go to a different destination, as in a place, there's no place you can go which has no suffering. All the destinations of places are, whether you're going to a different country, different cities, they are all suffering.
다 같은 거에 대해서 란트운도 와서 잠벌리 뒤서 체리기 되니 라지 티시게 됐다네 따나가서 토 따대야서 고나 빼면서 과 레하모 코데모여서 짱자라 되오른 잠벌리 롬바 가난도나 롬바티는도는 짜니 나자 와요만 나차 요말 둥아 짜니 와요말 롬바티는 로사 요르라서 롬바즈 문두 와서 요는 지체 뭐 초마디노 바본도로 와서 로사 문두 와서
So you can experience this yourself, right? You can hear it in the news, you can see it in the news. is no country or a place where you can go and that place guarantees that it's not going to be suffering there. There's no diseases, there's no trouble or anything in that country or place. There's no such places that you can find. If there exist such a places, everybody would want to go there, right?
내 가던라나 둥하겠네. 저서던라나 둥하겠죠. 다소서 트로포 네모 파마 빈자 신년도 되나야 둥하겠죠. 정조 지지 파르트를 라서 지지 강한테 돼야 둥하죠 돼야 지기 찔이 둥하테 지기 찔이 둥하테 돼야 지기 찔이 깔레테 지기 찔이 깔레테 돼 지질아 때니 둥하죠 돼야 둥하겠죠. 저좀 트로포 닌년도 되는 거 싸니 둥하고요 말을라서 그 트로포도 세는 트로포 년도 사요 말해서
Not only the places, even the people that you hang out with, right? Whether it's your friend, whether it's your parents, or anybody you go out with or you go with, there's no person such that if you go with that person, you will never experience any suffering. There will be some kind of suffering no matter wherever you go with.
Yeah, whenever you go with anybody, like you're giving each other, like this, people who are always periodically going through problems and giving difficulties to each other. So there's nobody that never gives you any problems, right?
빼나 아선자데 뺀차자 빼나 다리 덮보이는 선이 다 차던 게 몸보이오래.
For example, if somebody is your friend today, it is possible that that person can be your enemy tomorrow.
다리 히 하하서 돈바마 세모서 때려서 선이 밀렸다는 데서 몸보 찬로 그래서.
So there are people you smile with today, but tomorrow you might be giving a dirty looks.
샌들을 서서 셔줘서 댕기게 파마 이더니 쥐어시면 서서 다 차던 게 몸보이오래.
Even your parents who care about you so much in this life, in next life they might become your enemy.
쥐어시면 서서 다 차대게 샌들 서서 파마 차대야 몸보이오래.
In somebody who is your enemy in your previous life may have become your parent in this life.
어때래? 다 된데서 저 가던 전화야. 신년도 좋아하는 다른 건 니년도 바른 년도 니년도 맞아 째와 있는 걸 동화 짜니 와요 말다서 니년도가 덮어 되어 있는 대내가 동화 짜니 와요 말 갈라 동화 와요 말 콜라 동화 와요 말라서 요 말에.
So therefore there is nobody that you go with that can guarantee like a complete happiness to yourself or to the other person. There's no such person.
단인도서서 내 가던도나 동화게 내다 맞던도서 요 말을 저서다 년들 리더와 있나 동화게 들어다 맞던 이사요 말에 계사요 말에 근데 세 간도 서와 있나야 동화게 세다 맞던 돼요 말에.
So the first thing is there's no places that can guarantee you happiness, or then the second is there's no person that can 100% guarantee you the happiness or the lack of suffering. And the third thing is there's no food or anything that
세 가도 사와 있나 세 간라들 되죠 칼란데 사와 있는 대내가를 동화 짜니가 깡가 짜니 돼요 말가 뜨아요 말 나요 말 차요 말 칼란데라 땡을 동화 짜니 와요 말라 칼라도 짜니니야.
So there's no such a food that if you eat it you will be free from suffering. There's no such food.
내 단단히 시가진 색깔을 나와 있는 소지전에 내가 스젠내사 근데 탕초도 동화게 내려라고 들을 달아라도 내사 탕초도 동화게 내려서 디난내 랭케 그 소지 마찬게 그 스제 탕초도 동화제게 스제를 라디고 진짜 되니 좀 좋으래서.
The reason I'm explaining this is the Buddha Shakyamuni has taught that the places where the sentient beings exist is a place of suffering, right? So that's why I'm explaining anything in here is suffering.
다 단단해도 때지 세모 맞은 최종을 따서다 당기는 게 되는 때진 리오 말한다. 동화리야 타창케게 스제 마트 소마도 동화게 스제래. 동화뇨 하면 개용 말을란. 요 서지 마찬게 스제 탕초도 동화뇨 요를라는 내도 다좀 받더라도 어제 사요 말고 동화뇨 말고 동화 타달이야 타차로. 다 동화 타달이야 타창케게 스제도 많이 비춘줄로
So I want to clarify one thing, that when I refer to person, I'm referring to the sentient beings that are in the samsara right now. The arahats who have escaped the samsara, those are not included in here. They have already escaped the samsara, the Buddha and the arahats. When I'm referring to person here, they are not included in this person. We're talking about the sentient beings in this samsara.
All those who are completely free from samsara, that they are the ones that would never experience suffering. So as long as we are in samsara, that it is whatever you encounter, whatever you do, is always there is suffering connected to that.
Dunga chi tamatua in a kati yinayata kondona dunga ne ka sedonona dunga to se kadasana dunga that dunga chong no le so de ad matego that dunga le tag called the mewa that under the ziwa yitani chotambu she did dunga tamba de siware.
So that's why it is very important to know or identify the suffering. Only when you identify the sufferings, then you will look for the cause of the suffering or the solutions for the suffering, right? If you don't have the solutions, know the suffering, nor you know the causes and the solutions, then you will always be stuck in the suffering.
This is the reason why Buddha taught suffering first.
That is the Dunga the Shebachida, so that so Dunga Lankin, Dandratale Dunga Laundu, Dunga Lankin and Dandratare, and Tombo Dunga never the worst to a Sheba so shoes.
That's why the Buddha taught that it's important to identify the sufferings first.
That Dunga Chonsa is on the Togo to the Togo to Dunga, Chet the Kako with the Kako Dunga, Chonsan is on, they did not see talk with the Toy Dunga, they just tug with the Tsai Dunga, Tangata Dunga Lankin.
So there are different levels of suffering, right? There are minor sufferings such as hunger, thirst, and then you feel hot, cold. So those are minor. There are different variations of sufferings. So we have already studied the truth of suffering in previous classes, so we won't go into detail. The most important thing here is Buddha said that first identify the suffering.
Dunga the Sheba Chishola, that Dunga the Machine Carriore, Dunga Shin Carapore, Dunga Machine Carriore, Dunga the Mashiwa Yin, Dungalia Tantugo Lotsani Guayomare.
Why he taught that you need to identify the suffering? The reason is if you do not know or identify the suffering, you won't have the mental will to escape from this suffering. So when you know the suffering, you want to escape from it, right? That's why you need to know the suffering. So if you don't have the will to escape from the suffering, then correct?
You will never be.
You will never be able to escape.
Oh, that is one. That is Tombo Dunga the Sheba.
So that's why you need to identify the suffering first.
Peneta Dunga the Shetan. That don't have the Mevozo and that don't have the Mevozo and Tagore.
Now, once you know or identify the suffering, then the second thing is, can we get rid of this suffering? That's the second question that arises.
That don't have the Mevozo and Tadi Kandata.
So, to look for whether there is a solution to get rid of the suffering, how do we look for it?
The Nazanga Dunga Karadana, when I talk to Dunga to us. Togo to Dunga Kani Gorlana, Calamara Tenegora was. Katujana, Katu Tessonoko, Calamara Tenegora was.
So, whether it's minor or major suffering, for example, we take an example of hunger. What is the cause of the hunger? Because we did not eat the food. Right? So how can we get rid of the suffering of hunger? You just eat the food, right? That is the cause. Lack of food is the cause. cause, and if you eat the food, then that will get rid of the suffering of hunger.
태색이 동아세야 돼. 태색이 동아세야. 러버러버게다 뒤통통들 동아세야 깨자로 와서.
So this is like the temporary solution for the getting rid of that particular suffering.
당아서 칸다도 쉬어서 가고 타와나도 거머리 정도 칸다도 쉬어서 가고 요 가까이 동아서 해고로 와서.
So when you feel thirsty, then you have a suffering of thirst, right?
다트다이 가까이 동아도 갈라 때는 서와서라 때는 깔래가 서와서라 때는 가까이로 와서.
So due to the heat, you become thirsty, right?
다트 동아도 쓰서 가도 치자라라는 생으로 와서.
So if you drink water, then you get rid of this thirst suffering.
다티는 다 소지 조던데 그 동아들라가라는 다바 동아들 세바제는 다 동아들 세는 동아들 매워서 안 좋다와라 다 동아들 주제 갈라때네 뜻이고래서 동아들 저 갈라때네 종사 제 갈라때네 종사 그 종사도 가니라서 더 하고 그래서.
So Buddha said that once you identify the suffering, then to look for the solution of the suffering, you need to know what caused that suffering in the first place.
Cause and condition.
What are the causes and conditions for that suffering?
그래. 다 소지 조던데 그 동아들 재미라때네 와요 말고 매버도 저도 제라때네 중고래서 동아들 받은.
So Buddha said that suffering does not arise without a causes. All the suffering has its own causes and conditions.
다고 저도 제라때네 중고는 그게 저도 제가들을 하고 그래서.
Since all the suffering has its own cause and conditions, then you need to know what are those causes.
다케 저도 제가라때는 그게 저도 견조된 발라때네 운도다 그게 저때와도 견조된 발에서 다 당가서
So the root cause of all the suffering is the second teaching, which is the truth of origin of the suffering.
다 니카투데 당가서 견조된 바그 거의 마마히한 니카투데 당가서 가르라는 조안로아 여된 그게 시초다 나가 가서 스제던 레위 나가 새도 초와던 레위가 샤와 베나데와 둥하란 가둘란다 나차 같이 몸부지 오라 새코던 레위가 샤와 시응어보 나가 새코던 만데니 시응어보던 레위가 조안로아 여된 그 가임바 탄주도 저도 제라 때네 마찬 기지 지에요 말은 내봐도 저도 제라 때네 제교와도 또 남비 사지 근처가 전혀 말에 최고 출루가 전혀 말에 그러 뭐 보고 한색이 실루해서 다들 패키지 버려서 다 하고 가도 패키지 버려서.
So you need to know that anything that changes, whether it is something internal, feelings such as happiness, sadness, or any kind of emotion that go through changes, or whether it is an external things, you see external changes, right? So anything you are doing something harder.
조안도 된게 조안도 아야 된게 시응어보다 나 조안도 아야 된게 처음에 제라 때네 고된게 정조 콜 제면에 와매 된게 저도 제면에 그 싸니 좋아매 된게.
So anything that changes occur, whether it's internal or the external thing, it's due to the causes and condition. They all have their own causes and condition. Without cause and condition, you won't see any changes, whether it's internal or external things.
단단가서 기타 제목을 가르쳐 도르라는 난초의 töне 있는다도 체력의 töne 있나 석강그 조안로대야 영케가 오보지 이친초로 고저도 제라 뜨뭐 근케서 석강가 가투야 용 말해서 내봐도 고 제라 때문에 조금 그 땅땅 자대요래.
So whether it is we can see it in Buddha's teaching or scientifically, we know that if something changes, it is due to a cause, right? Without a cause, we cannot identify anything that goes through changes without the causes. It is not something that is created by Buddha or Buddhism, right? Buddhist teaching. It is just the nature of things. Anything that changes needs to have a cause.
내가서 담보 디테일을 담보 가서 베스칼 kallar det så lebitone kwa ya bo chagwa de peke chembore se tra pa shure se pena so shitogri de ora fruit shitogri do shitogri ndamda mo bu shuze ora se shitogri pena banana apple da shitogri ndamda mo bu shuze ora se.
So it is very important to know this concept thoroughly. It is not that difficult to understand it. It's a very a simple concept. For example, there are different kinds of fruits, right? For example, bananas, apples, and so on.
디 시도르 처마 저도 젤라 때네 고무근 키크로 석 강디요 저도 젤라 때네 찌무근 키도 찌요 말로 와서
So all those fruit, they do not come into being without causes, right? They all have their own causes and conditions.
다가 정거서 라반 투데야 용 키가 nga 정거서 산테야 여든 키 정저로 와서
So we can see those through our eyes, right?
어들 당가서 트리 시동그리 연다면 너무 무시 의지로 와
For example, different kinds of trees.
그 처마도 저도 젤라 때네 찌무근 키서 찌요 말로 와서
So none of those comes into being without their own causes and conditions.
다 쳐도 로라서 봐 사도 돌아서 봐 정말 요마도 저도 젤라 때네 마고 땡겨서 그러 젤라 또 먹은 게 저도 젤라 때네 마치 땡겨서 찌에 와래
Same thing with the air, water, rocks, and so on. All of those came into being due to their own causes and conditions.
다 등가서 하고 그 다티게 저들라 진이 오래서 저도 젤라 나도 나치나를 녀래게 저도 해지시 저기 저라 니센 오래서
So all the causes in Buddhist teaching are divided into two types of causes. One is the substantial cause, and the second is the cooperative cause. We also call it as a condition.
당연히 개천부 있다니 다리와 짜시에서 인데 사방가 기어로 다등에 가서 몸보게 잘해도 빼면서 개천부 난쟁에 짜시 몸보서 대하다 때지 개천부 이미 따르다 최선디로 때지 야로로 그래서는 게 되게 연주 짜짜도서 되고 하다 때래서
So we have gone through these two different types of causes many times in previous class, but I want to repeat it today because we may have new students, and whenever I repeat a thing, some concept, it means that it's a very important concept. So when I'm repeating the same concept again and again, please keep in mind that you need to understand it.
다 녀래기 저도 해지시 저기 들라는 가서 나온 얼미 따따래 다 저들라 녀래기 들라된 키드가라는 다 저가든 빼난다서는 신드그리 마쳐셔도 녀래기 들라는 디테 위저에 배진 두라 신드단데와 스 인트그리다 답변아 다 녀래기 들라된 키드빼나 메토그 산다도 저는 메토게 사드 메토게 녀래기 저래대요 그러니까 처음에 아주 찌빠샤치 오래서 메토게 사드 메토게 녀래기 저래대요 그래서
So the substantial cause means, for example, for a flower, a seed will be its own substantial cause.
메토게 사드 메토게 녀래기 저라고 하가는 메토게 사크로라 때니알 칼레칼레존 메토 차요라죠 크로크라 메토고 오야는 로레 메토게 사크로 칼레칼레존 크로그 니바 찬소도 메토 원도는 그 메토 차고아요로 와서 이 있잖아요 그 녀래기 저서
The reason the seed is referred to as the substantial cause of that flower is the seed itself converts into the flower, right? That's why.
다 녀래기 저 가인 받았다 그래 녀래기 저 가인 받아 소속은 레보 오야는 로아요 되게 소속 레보 빼나 에포게 녀래기 저 칼레칼레존 에포고 트리도 에포 오야는 로아요 되게 어다다 고래서 녀래기
So
들라야데
all the substantial causes should be something that the thing itself becomes the end result. Such as the apple tree, the apple seed becomes the apple tree, right? That is what, in any kind of example, the thing itself goes into the result.
달 해체 시작이 되려는 다 코드 찌와라 로바치 땡기 그래서
So then the second is the cooperative cause. That is something that helps that cause, substantial cause, turn into the result.
빼나라서 다가자 메토를 빼가는 데는 정말 집어들 메토게 사드 메토게 녀래기 저지
So again, we're going to take the example of the flower. The seed is the substantial cause of that flower.
다 메토도 자마도나 사자로 먹고로 다 메토 모사게 사도 자마도 디노게 쳐도 르도 다 콜 군코 초마도 계게 해치 시작이 저래요 그래
And to grow this flower, we need to put that seed in the pot, right? We have to plant it. Then to plant it, we need a soil, water, pot. All those things are the cooperative cause of that flower.
해치 시작라는 코치야라 로바치게 야 로바치게 저주치게 ko jiala ben medo sele medo jiala medo sado cho lo para ko jo chu jine jiego ra di zo tan de ese.
So all the cooperative causes are the causes that helps the cause turns into its result, such as in this example, soil, water, and so on.
Oh, de tanga so na go jinde no na go ta shi ngo po go jinde na go nga so se je ga na cho do de du don re go ta shawa ga re ina ya choma de yo je da je la de ne ma gon ke si yo ma re ese.
So there was an example of an external cause and effect. Now we can take it and apply it to our own internal things, whether it's the experience of happiness, sadness, or anything. It has its own causes as well.
Oh, de ta de so je jo de de ta du ha ge je da la kenjo den ba de sha as du ha ge je de kenjo den ba de sha so
So
de.
that's why Buddha Shakyamuni taught that the suffering, the cause of the suffering is the truth of the origin of suffering.
다가 전되나요 말. 하나 더 동하 담바게 제대 kenjo 담바 이나 kenjo 담바 달라 간다요래. 라는 kenjo 담바 달라 덴세니요래.
So that truth of origin we can further divide into two types.
다제 되나마 요래. 다 kenjo 담바 달라 덴세니 가래 요래라는 녀무비 kenjo 담바도 레지 kenjo 담바란 케니요래.
So the two types are the afflictive truth of origin and the karmic truth of origin. So one through the affliction and one through action or the karma.
다 녀무비 kenjo 담바 달라 가정아서 뭐보시다라 다들 뭐가 아닌 대시죠 뭐 녀무게 kenjo 담바게 싸워도 녀무도 싸더래서 더 자샤 더 컨트롤 싸다가 저 가정아서 짜냐 둘라 지게 된바 다들아도 쪼더래 요래서.
So the first one, the afflictive truth of origin, those are the what we have previously studied, the six root cause.
더차
So those are three poisons:
특별히 더차 샤도 컨트롤 싸라네.
desire, ignorance, and anger.
다다가 저도 저도 제대로 저도 내가 그 녀무도 싸라들 뭐지 더차 샤도 컨트롤은 샤도 컨트롤이도 작용도 리치는 더차 컨트롤 때문에서 작용도 원래는 더차 더차도 컨트롤 때문에서 하더래. 더차 컨트롤 때문에.
So the three poisons, sometimes we refer to them as the attachment, aversion, and the ignorance, but the real three poisons are the desire,
컨트롤
anger,
말이 빠졌을 때
and ignorance. Yeah, so these three are the poisons, the main three poisons.
Sometimes we say desire, desire, hatred, and anger, but it's actually desire, anger, and ignorance.
가르라는 샤도도 컨트롤의 코터래 컨트롤하는 가정아서 컨트롤하고는 컨트롤 제대 냐는 셀마 나자 냐대아드 셀 나자 띠네서 냐대아들 샤도라 오르세 샤도도 컨트롤 코터다들에세
곤직스는 아무래도
Okay. Hatred, it's a part of anger. So what happens is when one is angry, and then you hang on to that, you can't let go of that anger, and then it turns into hatred.
배낭아서 샤도 컨트롤이 봐 제발 제가 멀어 린다면 저 리지의 컨트롤 참고 쉬인 바치 컨트롤의 라선 잔도 자 산에요 짜니 살은 나자 짜니 매워지 해만 나게 좀 댕기 지우는 나들 배 가보요.
So some, you have different type of people. There are some that are very easy to get angry, and then once they're angry and have an outburst or whatever, and after that they don't hold grudge. They've already forgotten the instant. And Geshe-la said he likes that type of people. Once they have let go of that anger, their mind has become completely cleaned or purified. And he's already like like the way he was before.
다리 컨트롤하는 라 다리 컨트롤 라나 라서 컨트롤 넘버 첨부 마테와이나 가디나티 나자도 냐데네 가디나 제림보 로치니 제네나 단다티 나자도 지냐덴데 게 틀리지 컨트롤 제좀 땡게들라 시나다 단다다
So the other, like another when we, in terms of hatred, then some people that don't even show in their face that whatever is bothering them, whatever like hurt them, but they'll hold it into their mind. They hold grudge, and then they won't let go of that. Even years go by, they're still holding onto that grudge and the hatred. That is hatred.
다단다 켄조 담발라나 켄조라나 다가나나 동하 켄네 조데사 동하 탕조도 종데사디 있다니 켄조 동하 켄라딘 마치레 까카체케나가 켄라디 몽복치레 동하 탕조 동하 초마디알 종코 종사가 nenda디 있다니 켄조 담바.
So when we talk about Kunjung Temple, Kunjung is origin of suffering, or origin of the truth of origin, and that one is that all the sufferings combined together, and then all the sufferings that arises, like where you identify the origin of suffering, is where all the sufferings come from, and this is the term we use, origin of suffering, and in Tibetan it's Kunjung Temple, truth of origin.
어더래 다가르는 켄조 담바달란 다이스데다 당아서 켄조 담바달라가르나는 녀무비 켄조 담바스 녀무비 켄조 담바달라 단다 녀무두소 너차다 컨트롤 마리 파사다 대화들에 대화들에.
So here the afflictive truth of origin, the main three things. So we have that includes 6 root afflictions and the 20 secondary afflictions, but the main cause are the 3 poisons, which are the desire, anger, and the ignorance, which are also included in the 6 root afflictions.
대리 가정가서 녀무비 켄조 담바돈 레네 땡데 쥐니기 투니마
So, with something that is related to this concept is the 12 links of dependent origination, which we have already studied in previous classes. So today we're going to study the karmic truth of origin.
다 레지 켄조 담발라나 레드레 데오르서 다 레드라 게위레도 마게위레데 로마타게 레라나 레사요레스 레만다와 사요레스 담보 게위레 지지 마게위레 지지 로마타게 게와도 마게와 카야 마인케게 레지.
So this karmic truth of origin is due to the karma, right? The actions that you have committed, and this is classified into 3 different types: virtuous karma, non-virtuous karma, and neutral karma.
그래. 다 단단데 뒤에는 와서 때지 배우래. 정도 단다 레게 개조 담아달라 레 게을리면 단다 레지 개조 담아도 가니 고르는 녀무 개조 담아라니고 그래서 녀무 개조 담아라니고 그래서.
So this karmic truth of origin, where does it come from? That comes from the first one, the afflictive truth of origin.
다들 좋다 간다래라는 해마게 지시에 다다리와 지시고 와서들 패지래서 온도 지시고 와서.
So how does it arise or work? I've already explained it, but I'll repeat it today.
대아마라 체스야. 다 담봉 가서 이노래서 마리빠. 때와도 마리빠들의 총하고 싸워도 마리빠들은 나는 라친자게 롱아 짜청부서 된게 로드레스.
So the root cause of everything is the ignorance that sees, the self-grasping ignorance that see and give so much importance to I, that I label.
단단 가서 이노래서 난제 마리빠라대게 마리빠들그 나 가르가 나 짜청부서 그러는데 맨케 짜니 찐데 니야 맨케가 나서 뜻자청부서 또 여와가서 우선 뜻자청부 우선마 산마 땅땅마서 아지 짜청부는 살대 오래.
So that self-grasping ignorance is giving so much importance to that label I that we call ourselves self or I, even though it does not exist. that non-existent thing we're giving so much importance to. That is the self-grasping ignorance.
다 던다데 nga tsa chenpo zewa tene tene karen ngai da ngai nye ngai gasa ngai yasa lana chemen otto ma mombo soso pa ta ga ore soso pa zo ga ore se.
Then, due to that self-grasping ignorance that believes in the I, then the next thing that arises is my friend, my enemy, my property. So those things arises. So those are all the inappropriate attentions that self-grasping ignorance creates.
다 던다의 체면이 신나 뜨고 파시도 치제 많이 봐. 정말 치제 많이 봐도 mombo 힘봐도 소속 봐서 소속 봐서 아다 소속 하마고는 mombo 저가 그래서 mombo 다녀라 mombo 저가 그래서.
So due to that self-grasping ignorance, you create so many things like non-existent things. So those creations are the inappropriate attention. So our mind creates so many things that it actually has no essence.
The ignorance creates ignorance itself, like the mind is full of thought that grasp things that are not exactly the way it is, but because the thoughts somehow you believe they're all truth.
And therefore it creates all the problems.
다 던다서 따가도 체면이 어떻게 봐 mombo 따가도 다 소소 그 가살라지 다 들 차예지 다 소소 그 먹가살라지 다 들 다예지 다 소소 던다 다들 차도 너 차셔도 컨트롤하다 되네 라오네세.
So that mind which creates things that don't exist, what happens is then you create your friends, right? Once you create your friends in your mind, you have desire or attachment towards those things. And then once your mind creates enemy in your mind, then you have aversion towards those people who you consider as an enemy. So all those attachment, desire, anger, hatred, aversion arises due to that mental creation.
다 때네 너 자셔도 컨트롤 몸보를 레카테고디 다 때너 자셔도 컨트롤 뿌라도 미게월을 되오래 미게윌이 뒤년도 그 샤와 강체바 탄쳐도 미게윌이 사고래 딱 견줄 때만 레게 견줄 미게윌이 되는 거래.
So once the poisons arise, like such as desire, anger, ignorance, those are basically your non-virtuous action, right? So these are the part of non-virtuous karma.
당하서 라친자 데 이너에서 마리파 nga 헬르 마서는 다 댕게 nga 짜쳐 무슨 제 댕게 nga 마리파지요 다든다에 nga 마리파다 때지 발로 투아들 시기로 투르라는 동반이 간 nga like 댕게 안도면투다 nga like 짜니 만두 소데야 다 디트 발로서 쿠쳐보던 로투아 있는 다대서 다대 nga 마리파기수 다대야데 실로 투르라는 나센도는 니야메 바히덴게 로드가 코발로 투레스 데지로 투레스.
So this self-grasping ignorance which is within all of us and which tie us in the suffering, what can loosen or ultimately destroy this self-grasping ignorance is emptiness. If you meditate on emptiness, you can slowly start to loosen your attachment towards that self-grasping ignorance that consider I is so important and ultimately let you destroy that self-grasping ignorance.
So what happens is ignorance is the one that created that I, and then grasping at that I, it's the most important thing. So ignorance is the root cause of the existence of self-grasping I, and the only way that one can recognize is sort of destroy that is wisdom, realizing the non-existence of that I.
그래. 다때서 데들 다티까글로 서서요 때지 간제 후첨보슈 여댕게다 땅에서 뭐지는 간제 후첨보 요데오라 간제 후첨보슈 여댕게다가 달라서 가서 디테일 때지 거녀래 제투한 간제 때지 봐 너무 차야를 가르 배우려는 Tanga ala soso ngala zachin bozo denke the antu tana soso zechezone yada ya pena soso tada ngareve soso gongo ngareve soso mi ngareve soso na je li tana tango tatse ne kang me de samo manchu de ngare da jinro ngare de mare soso patache zama ngare de jinro
So we all have the strong self-grasping ignorance, right? Because we all consider ourselves very important. Then what you need to do is first analyze where you can find that I that you believe exists so truly. You start practicing, you can do it by practicing such as from the top of your head, think one hair, is that I? Then head, I, like then you can go down to your toes, right? Point at each part of your body and heart or anything, whether that is I. You cannot find that I. So you should practice in such a way that you cannot find that I.
That is the thing ngani ma tuaji. Ta ngani amen shi zubo chache chansu tene ngani tu maswa. Ta nolu cha ngarendu. Nolu za ngarendu. Ta papa ngarendu. Kharendu ta ngani tu mdu asan.
So you go through all the external things on your body. Can you find I in there? No. Then you go inside your blood, your nerves and everything. Are they I? You cannot find that I.
Tanya matu ta nole bandu. Jama chemba lewa the tachin ramadam bozura.
Then you can go further, like is your intestine I? Is your lungs I? Still you cannot find that I.
당아서 천이박을 repatadi 나르게 쳔반다든가 있는 로아당가 이고 케마당가 이고 뭐 그게 진짜 용 말에 repata 오르다가 저던 거야 진짜 던다 repata 아요래 진짜 소이스 배나 나가 쳔반다지고라 쳔발라오라 레바당가 있는 나가 케마당가 이고 그래서 진짜 가르라는 진짜 저 지이치매 소이스 다 나가 케마당가 있는 케마니가 당가 이고 그래서 Then I saw Chaso, Kemani, Chambaji, Tatandas of the Korapataki, Tanga Maimbaga, Patanda Patsamas on the Hizon, Tanagi, Chamba Leva, Kemala, so much mother, Nanyana, or the same or was it.
So when we debate, we say that, let's say, for example, the liver is I. Then if the liver is I, then using the same logic, your lungs should be I, your kidney should be I. Then you'll end up with like 3 different I, which is not possible. So we use such kinds of logic during our debate. It's not important here, but I just want to share it.
Tatanda Mount is not to Sharak Pentachimbo use or Tumbani Nalaba Tumbani Alaba County Teado, then Nalana Shook, Mala Huchambas had the other day, but Hulan Sharak Pento.
So that's why it is very important to analyze or think or practice in such a way that if you keep doing it, it will slowly loosen your grip on the self-grasping ignorance.
It's not just during debate. It's like questions you should ask yourself. Like you say, okay, could my one of my organs, my heart, let's say, could that be I? And then, reason why it is, why it's not. And then as you examine and question each thing, then you'll come to the correct conclusions.
Tătăile hamorezul ora tandanga sala de shigtatene cosete bada naga khata pasa da naga lebe chemba da choma da soso mai bada soso ta she tata kota te le hamorezul ora da soso laso kota de sina ter ikele maro tătate ji hel hamo to demo ko demo to demo rezore.
It's a very easy concept to understand what I just taught you, right? The practice of from thinking from the top of your head till the heel of your feet, that whether the I exists in any part of your body. It's a very simple concept. When I explain it to you, it's not that tricky, right? You all understood how to do this practice.
For example,
there is a person called Tashi. Is Tashi's head Tashi?
Tashi Garilana, Combat Tashi, Tashi, Lapa Tashi, Lana, Sakanga Umara.
So whether Tashi's leg is Tashi, Tashi's hand is Tashi, nobody's going to refer to Tashi's hand as Tashi, right?
Then Tashi, Papa Tashi, 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 Roko Tashi, Lankes, Koyomara.
Is Tashi's blood Tashi? Is Tashi's bone Tashi? No, right?
Yes, Koyomara. Then again, Tashi, Chemba Tashi, Tashi, Kema Tashi, Lankes, Koyomara.
Similarly, with all the organs, is that liver of Tashi, or kidney, and so on, the same thing?
Tata Ratel Hamores, Sakayomari, Hill Hamores,
So it's very easy to understand, right? Nobody with the same mind will call the liver of Tashi, Tashi, right?
Tanga second that Tashi Misha Tashiari, Miki Shepa Tashiari.
Now let's go into the consciousness level, like the mental level is the top.
Gonga Shepa, the Inchikala, Gonga, me,
Five sense
Yeah, the five. Then we go internal into the mental level. Look at the 5 sense consciousness. Is the I consciousness of Tashi, Tashi?
Yeah, that doesn't the Gonga Shepa Rene Tashi Arilana, me Shepa Tashi Marilana, Migi Shepa Tashi, me Shepa Tashi Lankas, Kayo Marato, Lelamus user. Yeah.
So similarly, nobody with the same mind will call the I consciousness of Tashi is Tashi, the present Tashi.
That report in Tashi, Mig number Shepa Tashi, you are ina, Icho ina, Tashi, Mig number Shepa Tashi, Icho ina. Trashing nine number Sheba Tashi Chore, trashing nine number Sheba Tashi Chores. The Ichos and the Michia Yomare, Jinseki Yomare, as a Tapangata or Tizon, that Tashi me number Sheba Tashi Lanki Yomar was.
So nobody will say Tashi's I consciousness is Tashi. Let's say, for example, that Tashi's I consciousness is a Tashi. Using the same reasoning, then that person has to agree that Tashi's ear consciousness is Tashi as well. So on, all he will have, there will be 5, since there are 5 different consciousness, there's 5 Tashis. There should be 5 Tashis.
Tanota the category and Tashi, you can know about Tashi Are, La Satal, that till not a Teji or Lagoon.
So the problem arises, or the debate arises, when people ask the question, is the mental consciousness of a Tashi Tashi?
That I thought the Pandroma goes at the Tamu, the Drama goes at that stage. I go to Totama, Jiganoni, Kaza, and get can't do that same, or the same Martin, Taoma Rajuma Manchuk, Teji, and now she the Kaza Dante good, they got the day let the Roa. The Benatashi and now she the Tashi, Tashi Land to sad men and two matters. Touching the sad Yogun, Kegi, you now she and the Tun matter, those two summon to let the Kama Rajuma Manchuk. That the chance of the
So it's a very profound concept. Let's not go into detail in this class, but just to give you an information, there are different Buddhist schools, right? All the Buddhist schools below the Swatantrika, Madhyamika, they need something to point to refer to as the person, right? So for them, they call the mental consciousness the person. Then the highest Buddhist school, which is the Prasangika Madhyamika school, they don't refer to the mental consciousness as the person. They have rejected all that.
that got a topic that Tashi you can number shepherd, Tashi you can number shepherd, Tashi Ademare, Lagodilla, Tashi you can number shepherd, Tashi said as a Tashi land in Zikusan Gores, Zikusan men, Masako Yichimares, touching Zikusan Gagon, Tashi you can number shepherd, Matu, Jasa Mandua, Lankichi Gores.
So then the question arises that for people when they say Tashi, they need something to point to, right? So since people don't have anything to point to, some group of people will refer to the mental consciousness of Tashi as a Tashi. That's the only way they can point to. It's a subtle concept, but I'm going to explain it to you so that there will even though you don't understand it, there will be some imprint left on your mind.
다들은 건물 루두도 빠데 더와트라파니가 르파야보슈 자타요레세.
So Arya Nagarjuna and Acharya Chandrakirti has given a very good explanation and a logical explanation to this.
제또 저라 트라시게 저거 이거 나바셰바다 트라시라는 저거 주사도 고레스라다 트라시라는 데라는 저거 주사 고마레스라 그래서
So they said that you might say that you need something to point to refer to Tashi, which you point to, the thing you point to is the mental consciousness, right? And they argue that you don't need anything to point to.
진세가를 나와 있나
Why?
그때지 참 그렇다 트라시라다 미타 따져레스 팔 미타 빠져레 마트 데라는 저거 주사 고마레스 팔 미타 빠져레스
So they argue that the Tashi or name is a mere label to refer to Tashi. You don't need any concrete object to point to know that Tashi.
다요 예매게 틀갈라 그러나는 고불 빠데데 빠데다 와타 빠데는 고불 루두니를 체라니게 때진 리우면 되다라 그래서
So since that's the argument the Arya Nagarjuna and Acharya Chandrakirti has given, the opponents say that what you said is, I don't agree with that.
제트라실라데 미타빠서렌데라는 저거 주사 마고와 이나 트라시기 저기 이거 넘바 셰바다 트라시샤 마고와 이나 제단다 트라시기 가르는 게메게 레몬부터 사요레 레라테네 데투 몬부터 뉴아요레라는 제 헤데운도 와서 와나 트라시는 데라는 저거 주사는 매 저거 주사는 뭐고 트라시기 이거 넘바 셰바다 트라시샤 마고와 이나서 다나 트라시기 게메게 레와도 레드
So the opponent argues back that, so if you say that you don't need anything to point to as a Tashi, then we all know that Tashi commits action, right? Whether it's a virtuous action or non-virtuous karma, Tashi engages in those. So where does, if Tashi is just a mere label, when Tashi commits karma, whether it's good or bad, where does those karma get attached to? What carries those karma of Tashi?
다 건물들도 받아다가 밖에 저러들 선택고 말처럼 선박 손도 떠서 총쇼 자살했들 선택고 말해서
So the two scholars replied back that you don't need to worry about that. You are thinking in a very narrow-minded way.
다시 그 게메게 바차도 레드 미쳤다요 저기 다신 걸 가져오래서
So they said that, the two scholars said that you don't need the actual concrete external object to carry the karmas. The karmas can be carried or attached to the mere label of Tashi.
미쳤다 그 다신 걸 가져오래 년도로래서
So those karma can go with the mere label as well.
가때 제 다시게 이거 넘바 셰바다 제 다시 이쯤에 우주존 더고 이난 다시라는 저거 주사도 그거지 대한이 다시 그 이거 넘바 셰바다 자고 이나 더고 이나서
If you must need something that you can point to and which you have already agreed to point it to that mental consciousness, if you must have something to point to,
더 자고 이나 가서 그 다시 저기 이거 넘바 셰바다 가임배 다리게 다시 저기 이거 넘바 셰바다 자임배 선인 좋은 저 다시 저기 이거 넘바 셰
then these two scholars have a question for the opponent. If you must need something to point to, which you are using as the mental consciousness, then which mental consciousness are you pointing it to? Is it since the mental consciousness keeps changing, are you pointing to the yesterday's mental consciousness? Are you pointing to the today or the present mental consciousness? Or are you pointing to the future mental consciousness? Which mental consciousness do you refer to as the Tashi? So there's lots of we can go into deep debate on this thing. Let's not go into detail. So each of those 5 consciousness the sense consciousness are not tashi, the person, I'll call it person.
대전에 당가서 즈보 셔나 처마들 자신들이라는 저거 조사도 예투가 문도 아서
So we cannot find that person tashi in wherever we point in our body.
나저 이노래서 그 가는 새 되려는 거리 봐서 셔나 처마들 자신들이라는 저거 조사 등가서 예투 말해도 이노래서 그 단단 예투야 영케가 아주 가 우주선은 새 되오래서 단다지 요한 새 되오래서
Even though using your own like reasoning, logic, and thinking, you cannot find that I by pointing it to the things. But what the self-grasping ignorance does is disregarding those logic. It believes in such I or the person does exist, even though you cannot find it.
오더래 당가서 데리던다도 자고 다 견조된 바들아 녀무비 견조된 바들 레지 견조된 바니 오래서 다들 나기 오라.
Now going back, we said that the truth of origin are of two types, the karmic one and the afflictive one.
다 녀무비 견조된 바랑케데 간다들 라고리 티게 된다 간다래라는 페이지 스테이지는 뒤요. 녀무비 견조된 바랑케 된다 가는 녀무비 견조된 바 소주를 여든게 그 가사게 셰주 고토마네 마쇼와 진진게 리고니 링아 이소그 샤와 가르나 마쇼와 제den게 다 야로 쩌소그 샤와 요무지와 까den게 다 든다들 라우레서 다 제대로 된다 라유지를 도만되게 로저den게 가사서 로저den은 이런에서 줘라 대den게 가사 당하자를 가사게서 셰주 고토마네 마쇼와 시비에서 셰주 고토마네 마쇼와 시는 리거던 링아 이소고 마쇼와 마쇼와시나는 디 링고니 가르나는 링고니 녀바사 나고니 녀바사 이용고니 녀바 다 로저라 된 단단 마리파도 로저라 여친출 링아 이송고니 드파사 데아드마트 겨와 두투아디 야보 요마레서 단다도도
So the definition of the afflictive truth of origin is the person who has the self-grasping ignorance within themselves constantly engages in all the non-virtuous activity through various channels which are referred to as our mental, verbal, and physical. Those the various channels are those three.
단다들라는 아니 뺏거도 뭐 단다서 단다가서 녀무비 견조 담바도 단다 녀무비 견조 담발라이에나 단다 디코트 도못지라네 녀무비 견조 담발라이에나 단다 짜녀도 냐냐니 그 단달라 대한테 초마도 녀무비 견조 담바레 송공도
So 6 root afflictions and 20 secondary afflictions are part of the afflictive truth of origin of suffering.
다 녀무비 견조 담바 단다의 녀무 줘라요 된게 가사지 이 친출을
So anybody who are with these afflictions can never be with peace with their physical body, verbally or mentally. They don't experience the peace. Okay, now we finished this. Then the karmic truth of origin.
다 레그 견주 담아고냐만 가서 때지 설련다 손라이 단데 개첨부 쉬우라 되고 니도 가서 때지 고야고 아차다게서 도인다서
So we will go slowly through this concept because it is a very important concept. So I want to make sure all of us understand it very well.
단다 녀미비 견주 담아데 레지 견주 담아라 된게 그 가르라는 녀미비 견주 담아 처마데 녀무래 되고 녀무 몸보다 레마인케 요래 녀무노 레마인케 이노레선다존 레마레 녀무 이된케 레마인케 몸보주 요래
So the difference between the two is the afflictive and the karmic truth of origin. Why those two are differentiated is there are many afflictive things which are not a karmic thing, such as the ignorance. It's not a karma, even though it's an affliction.
Yeah.
And this 저때 나는 좋아서 좋아서 가도 같이 하나 더 좋아 오, 예.
Kishla, you spoke on sort of the view of emptiness a little bit. So could you clarify, because there are some new people, about that does not, why it does not mean that there's nothing at all? Just a little bit.
Yeah, that's a very important, yeah. The other is the Tangan Hammer Mobola, and also Nanjing as a Tomani coloniality, the Nayomara Dame La Dandua, Tika Kara Hegorland, Yonke Gachi, the Menke Gachi, the never the Hegores, never the Hegor.
So when we study on emptiness, we always say that selflessness, right? The concept of selflessness. You must understand that self are two types, which is self that exists and self that does not exist.
A young kicking like the kid, Micha Tai Tagan, Penataka Topal, Mida, Tataki Tashi time, that Tashi Holata, young kick Tashi, the Menki Tashi Chini Yakure.
So that self which exists is just mere label. Going back to the example of the person called Tashi, Tashi has the self, the Tashi that exists, Tashi that does not exist.
Yonke Tashi take a crog, gay by a game, a gay lao shawa caricina, Tsoma, the Yonke Tashi Yondon Chua, Tapena Chua Shamalo, Quad. Roadi to Kale Chiwa, Tene Yala, Tam Malandon, Tam Mandosa, or Yarandon, Yaramara Chiwa Leandona, the Jan Tene Chiwa Leandro, then kid, Yonke Tashi the
So that self, the Tashi that exists, which is the mere label, is the one that is attached to the virtuous karma or the non-virtuous karma. The Tashi, when he engages in the virtuous or non-virtuous karma, the result is experienced by this label or the Tashi that exists. It is the same Tashi that goes from one life to another, whether it goes into the higher realm or lower realm.
Then the young Tashi Tatananga, Micha Tayet on Tashi La Dea, that is a Tanjiwaganogani, Gio Tamabania Soji Silent Denki, Lake Anna Karina Toma, the Quandro Denki, Micha Tayet on Micha Tayet on Tashi La Denki, the young Kigam Mother de.
So the Tashi that exists or the I that exists is the vessel or the container that carries all the karmic results, and that goes from one life to another life until that being attains enlightenment. So that is the self that exists, Tashi that exists. That label.
Nekaniba Mita dil Trahilin Zaguna, Pensag and Yonki Tashi Maki, the Tashi like Yagudi, Soso Sosolan Zagatuna, Penangarazon, Yonki Gisel, Mankegi, Soso Sosol, Yonki, Manki, Nini.
So here we're taking an example of the person called Tashi, right? But to exercise this, you can exercise this on yourself. Think of yourself, the I that exists and the I that does not exist.
Tangazo Yonking at the Tandala de other, Masaji Lakandogo, Kongi Amare, Kongi Apare, the Nechelare La Deangat, the Yonking at the Deures, the Yoshores, Yonking at the Deures.
So the self, that I that exists, is something that you think about, oh, tomorrow I need to go to work, I have father, mother, and so on. That is the I that exists, that is the label that exists of I.
So you then the Jula, then a sugar and then a Jose and then a Tisarilla. The other order, I desiring I located I Trellan, Yonking at the day.
Even Buddha Shakyamuni has that self that exists, right? Because he said, this is my teaching, this is my ball, and so on.
Titani, Yonking line, telling you that Kuchambo, your mother, Yonking Kuchambonzane, Talata and Yamutu Socia, your mother, Yonking other, interesting that they are going to Maridas.
So this self that exists, the label, that does not create all the problem. That ignorance does not
influence that.
The ignorance does not influence that, yeah.
Interesting that they are not. Very Huchambo, Malan and Trailer, Penatasin Trailer and Zitway, Penangaran, not best as Marangoli, Pasol, Martin, Teen Honya, and Marocas, Yachi lot, Yachi lot, and yours and that they would say.
Okay, so this self that exists, the label that exists, is not something that is created by the ignorance or it is influenced by the ignorance. the self that is created by the ignorance is something that you think that is not, it comes out without depending on anything, right?
어떤데서
That's something that stands out without depending on anything.
오더라 떠나는 자대 그래서 오다들에다 떡내받아 가서 하고 그래서
So you must understand the difference between those two.
오더라 그래서 던디서 던디서 당가서 다 단다 레지 견주 담바 다 레지 견주 담바달라 레 그래서
So the karmic, going back to the karmic truth of origin, for it to be a karmic truth of origin, it must be a karma or an action.
다 레지 견주 다 레지 견주 담바 걸 망아서 수고밖에 안 돼. 다 까먹지면 너는 카드치 도받아서는 가르 도받아서나 라시아 좋아한다기는 가르 도받아서나 가서 떼지 돌리서 간
So
까먹지야.
we will continue on this in next class, but right now, since we have only 10 minutes, if anybody have any questions or doubt about what we just learned, please ask.
가르 도파 현아야 가르 도파에나 도받아서
Any kind of doubt.
저도 가서 가정에 라이 가서 레전드들 고아야 아버지 차투어 있는 원내 전에 팬도요다 레전드를 고아야 아버지 차투어 있는 라슈가 선노크여서 투레스 원내 투레스.
So I've said this before many times, that once we have a good understanding of the cause and effect, it's very beneficial for us. The one with the good understanding on this concept, your mind becomes free.
Then 나그니 레전드를 고아디 서도 서로고들 소송원내 단에 마잠보 마탐보 마야로 라슈가 소래 마존 레전드를 시행을 했어.
So once your understanding of this cause and effect becomes deeper and deeper, you become more honest, more kind. Even though nobody is looking, you are ready to do the right, go in the right direction or the action, right? Because you know about the karma. You're afraid of the karma, even though nobody is looking.
Then 진짜 좋아한다 아야.
Any questions?
좋았어요. 콜
I have a
큰인다 야.
question.
야. 큰인다.
There's a self, and there's a not-self, and there's 5 selves.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand, like, I'm aware of myself. So does that mean I'm being inappropriate?
So Quran is ta yoshira, ta meochira, and ta ngashtola, ta ngana ko kita kunge shebanga yo. So are you, when you're saying 5 I, are you referring to the 5 consciousness?
Yes.
Yeah. Kunge shebanga de la yo do chesra. And the like do ona. Ani ta kora nam june nga la shora. Can you repeat the last part? Sorry.
Yeah, so if I'm aware of myself, yeah.
딱 고랑기 하고라 나 나는 진도래 딱 어디 가르래 딱딱래 상당하지
서로 단다디 됐다. 뭔지를 말씀 좀 하지 여봐지.
서로가 서로
소화지 여서. 그래서 이제 상담하는 노하우를 했어.
듣는지라야 말다서 듣는지 말이에요.
that's not a mistake. Yeah.
말을 가르가는 소소소소 메트를 알아고 가운데도 아버지 지워서만 지 코안에 타도로서 그 뒤동하고 와서 그서 하나 센터를 말하지 야로줘서 야보서 무슨 상관도 그서 대학을 마치서 그서 대학에서 가서 해본다 해서 또 여대게 나들에 되었다 뒤초와도 여초를 야보래 또 두자지야 말해서
So awareness of I that you have, that awareness that I am gonna get, I'm gonna escape from all the suffering, I will be kind. So that I is the label I. That's okay to have. That's chetan. But
That's the correct way of looking at it. Yeah, look, the I that wants to escape suffering, that wants to be helpful, the I is that, I want to help my parents, I want to do this. That I is the correct I.
단데 들라고 이 페이지에 때 처음으로 자고
공화시에부터 두고 세션 보니까 말했으면
라
공화시에가
어때? 공가 시바는 맞아요 말이다. 그래서 공가 시바도 말 미그 시바도 나 말에 나이 시바도 공가 시바도 소설에 나 말이에요.
But the 5 sense consciousness, like the sense of your consciousness of your hearing, your scent, your seeing, taste, etc., is not I. It's just labeled consciousness. as the act of the thing that can grasp hearing and all that.
저도 제 가면 단단 가서 그러는 용기 매기 많이 바로 이어셔 네 칼만 해리게 나오더라 이어셔도 소송 먼저 소로도 이어셔도 무식하게 하면 이어셔 또 이어셔 특히 차선 가라 간사야고 차선 내가모도 이어셔 그 말에서 모르겠어.
And it's no fault of yours that that you cannot distinguish properly between the I that exists and the I that does not exist. Because for Geshe-la and the teachers to speak on it, it's very easy to speak, say such and such is the I that exists and this is the I that does not exist. But to actually fully experience it and realize it, we all need to practice, meditate on it very deeply, and until you reach a certain height of your experiential meditation. Right now it's just a concept to you, to all of us, and we're trying to, but when you do actually experience it, you've reached a fairly high level.
맞아 가는 투고는 용기가 맞아 매기가 많이 봐도 이어서만 용기가 맞아 이제 매기가 맞아 내려와서 맞아 뒤도 그렇죠 되고 그래서.
So where we get confused and is stuck is the I that does exist and I that doesn't exist. The I that exists is sort of thinking is the I that doesn't exist actually I or not, and that sort of thought process. And
Dharma 나래 제가 ignorance 대학 맞이요. ignorance 대학 맞아 두면서 토라기 치도 도전하는도. 다 도전하는도 지시에 넣어서 버리고들 아무가 그쪽으로 아무 디바서서 슈차고 되고들 ignorance 대학 맞아 먼저 지하운도. 때문에 좀 몰았다 째다 쳐보소. 피싱아 커서서 다 피싱한 디마서서 그다음 뭐다 그쪽으로 슈즈 되었지. 콩초 그쪽으로 동막가 저거데 등각가 걸로 이내라서 대다 맞아. 따티가 걸로 뭐서 통계진도 땅에서 다시 뒤가 되고 그러는가. 아주 그거래.
When you experience some real incredible fear, like for example a car accident, all of a sudden, and you have a big accident, and you're like, oh no, am I going to die? And this strong fear comes, and that's the ignorance. At that moment, when you fear for your life, and you're like, this strong grasping is happening, and at that moment, if you can see that is I that does not exist, that's the I that's created by self-grasping ignorance. If you can recognize it at that moment, then you've reached a fairly good level.
제대로 가다서 올라가는 가서 소화되고 말은 가서 다르게 면도사고 말은 다 뒤가 걸 가다서 해보려는 이노라서 내가 말라데 가다서 해보려는 말라데 게다가 알아서는 딱 말라데 소송 멀리 봐서 리마 있어 섞어를 뜨면 그 뒤너리를 같이 서로가 로스지 옆에 게다서 세고래로 말라는 답변을 시킨다. 당한 디마서 그 말도 고리 봐서 저거 신호 처음을 때만 그 뜨마고 그 그렇게 찌만이야 뺏어야지 대고 되기 같은 사람을 해라. 다들 뭐 이래서
when you have that sort of a great accident or this big event happening, the fear that arises that am I going to die, and that fear, this really strong I comes out that does not this I that stands on its own, that's going to be lost, does not rely on your all your senses, your body. It's not it's something that doesn't rely on anything else. It's just it by itself, a solid thing that you'll perceive it as a solid thing that that it is
without independence.
Yeah, it's real independence, and that is the one self-grasping ignorance I, the wrong I.
So does the consciousness create the I?
다 너무 좋아서 다 쉐바가는 나도 저 토마마바는 로데라라드 저 토마마바반 로덴게 단단 나지요 되오르 쉐바 타모도 켈라 되오르 데 쉐바 타모도 창조 여위고 창조고도 주투고 창조고도 저 마투고 요 되오르 말라 게테 땅고도 주주바 유유바나데 저 셔마년데 원데니 판로덴게 나지오라 거까 이나야 뭐도 주주바 걔가 내가 제제 만다 다 쉐바 좀 겨 가만히 쉐바도 되게 다 시반 도주들라 다 시바 타모지 오래 티 창조가 내가 제투라 창조가 내가 제투 말에 내가 제무티 티 큰걸 게임에게 내가 사더라고 말에 그때 저 타모를 다까지는 맞이나 걔가 나는 시바도
시바기 다 나도 쓰기 어려웠어.
알아 대시바 말에 다그 소속가는 딱 한다 쉬우쳐버려 다 이너라서 구쳐버리고 이너라서 구쳐버리고 딜을 괜찮고 콘자되게 이너라서 구쳐버리고
So it is not that the consciousness creates the I. When you have a strong ignorance, that ignorance creates that I that does not think that I that does not exist exists.
타모리야 다케요
Of course, there is the real I, the labeled I, which is always there. It's very calm. It's moving from lifetime to lifetime, and it's constantly there. It does not waver, as does the I that is created by the I that does not exist, which is created by a self-grasping ignorance.
어디 다크인다 보사야 가서 보사야 잘할 줄 아인다야 그때 야번이야 야 가르치니다는 제가 가르치니다는 또 퀄리티잖아 롯스피가 커다면 때는 안 되니까 야 나다래 좋아하셔
Okay. So the other day, me and him, we had it was more like a debate. So the question was, what was the origin of suffering? I said it was I, but he said it was attachment. But he had a good example, like the attachment. So what was the example?
So you have a car, right? And then the car
Yeah,
gets damaged or something happens to your car.
So you would suffer, right? But for me, I said I, but I couldn't give him the examples. So the question is what's the difference? The attachment and I couldn't understand. It kind of goes hand to hand, but at the same time, it's kind of different at the same time. So the question is is there an example of I and the attachment? So many the suffering ko la ke she de ba
야 건도 건이야
동의 ko la ke she de wala ko ma jo ko 동의 de 간대 중국을 해서 얘기 나 아이라 나네
배 백기 비자야
언디 신의 강의 중국을 해래 아니 코에서나 작바야 언데기 중국을 해서 아니 코 엔데라 되고라 코아지 example 하네
빼나
배 사교 지겨라 언데디 모다 콜라샤스 더 모다지 모달라 accident China 코다 더 모달라 코 깔리 가레 뉴제레 아니 직 독자직 차드고라 코다 심바 포라
보러야
야 아니 nga shaina ngegi nga ladgola nga khola example 할래
빼나야
pe te thomas 다 ngagi 가시니 동해 중거래라네 아니 원디고라 상호야고 땅디 nga당
야야 차라도 모타
야 원디 도도 야 도도 통시야 그냥 this and 요시 토마스
뜻이 야바래 근데 난 제백게 야와도 줘 야야
야타주도
배야 다 지금 그 하사야 돼 근데 켈란드 단도 차드드드 ngala de nganse ni de par chaba kare yo ke
So,
jala de
Korangilana, yo, Dumegi Judi Ngala is a word, Togwelana, Dumegi Judi Duchan is a word, and Dushaki Bear wish there's on that Tobogi. Korangian, Dungi, Narangi Sigu, the Narangi, Kandis, make it pay the Jemato, Jetumafonsa. That the condition there's a chaotic.
ala la 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 la
你不有个那样的第一看看去读一遍书，这是
dunga de kare no ngaro go zore la de ad dunga ga ngaro zore la 좀 저기 dunga ngaro zota bande ki dunga de ngaro go khanda zore la ji ora dunga de ngaro khanda zore la di ta ta nge la de ad de nga la no to bo so so za xiang bu ji zora de la de ne chme shin no de ge o pe xie ken ga ji ya bo zo sa ma re ken ga pe ji ya bo zo sa re ko ga le go a de sha ko ga le mu go a de sha san la ne tambo nga zacheman zebala tene tene ti shigulo semission not to go mombozo dala tene tanan do chakela dan do cha da tralego do cha da tralego tan do cha da prad du hare de ore do cha ga ga mgwa samad gonke so gore tan ram tan yota mombozo so gone dala tene do cha la tene tene du hare lego do so so ndo ba na ye de yong tu ma ro so so ndo ba na ye de tomato ndo ba na ye de ramatu dane duhada gode ore cheto tuada tere nada tere ra ya cheta chengone pe aba chini pe aba tanda trewa sanji chini dole zo trewa sanji
ngue dinge sobre de ja de sobre
duhada tambo chezo ran do chaga zore lawa yin duhada tambo nganza de sore nganza la tene chime shin no tu de ji ji ro tene chime shin no tu la tene duhada so ga ro do sha she do control pro de duhada de ro 그래서 널 후청부터 하고 들을 산투지 되고라.
So, Koraniga Jigura. So, you said that it is caused by the I, but you cannot give a good example. And your friend said that it's caused by the attachment with a good example, right? You both are correct. So, they are caused at a different level. So, how the suffering arises is, as I've explained before, first level is the self-grasping ignorance. That's how I create the suffering. You believing in the I which does not exist to exist, right? Which is the self-grasping ignorance. That creates the inappropriate attention. So you create, oh, my friend, my enemy, my car. So this inappropriate attention at the second level gives rise to the three poisons. So once you have created that it's my I, then you have attachment towards your I. So once the attachment arises, then the suffering arises. So your friend is at this level, that different level.
Yeah.
So yours is the origin of suffering. You know, where is that I? And from that comes attachment and aversion. Three poisons come from that. So both of you, you know, you are at the origin, and you was substantial, you know, the following that I.
단나가서 너샤라 대하던도아 너샤로 타라모부 쉬우요래 너차 타모라빠 단나가서 뭐 지정가서 너차 라빠 예월을 주대하던 너바 참보래 너바 빼나 담보 못하지 매는 못하지 그거래 다 못하지 연는지 못하 공심보 매는데 못하지 또 아연한데 이서래 야다 못하 또 아연 계절아 차래 오 다들 뜻이 야즈 공두다 내 족보게 야즈 떠오는 하라 야즈 공두아서 야즈 공래 다들 야즈 라차와 있는 저 로치지군이 어떻게 나오 말해 오 걔들이 지지 떠는 게 달랭아 단다 지지 공두아서 안다 너바 첨부 다 너바 같이 채되어 있는 너바 채대하게 초말로 서로 누한테 대하지 마더리고 말해
So this desire or the attachment can be of a different type, right? The subtle attachments and the gross attachment. For example, the car is a gross attachment. At first, if you don't own a car, you just want a car, right, to get you from point A to B. Once you have that, then you say that, oh, my friend has a better car. I need a better than him. And once you have that better car, now after a few years, that's not enough. I need even better car. So it keeps going like that. As long as you have the attachment, there's always suffering attached with it. Okay, we'll end here.
차라 두지 체인다. 다 그니니가 더 차라 나게 밖에 야보소쇼. 배야반데 어이 정주 전주는 뭐제 마제 바노 지제 기와냥 바네 바 고네 고든 배와라이쇼 고르라의 거의 신고 배도 대와 말인조에 시레세와 댄세 장소 쇼베센데 바도 댄주르지 땡큐 투지치
나写出嘛是吗？
라